Okay, it's been almost a week now since the PP Justia patch was released. I know people have been asking for my thoughts for quite a while now. It's taken me a little bit of time. I have to organize my thoughts and again take notes with people, and again real life gets in the way, so thanks for being patient. We still have at least a week left on our banner to decide if you want to poll, but yeah, so here's the second installment of the summer swimsuit costume series, I guess. Before we talk about Justia, we should definitely be talking about Nebris and Sacred Justia. So Nebris, briefly, too expensive at 3 SP. She's meant to be a PvE costume. She's not even that great in PvE yet. She's definitely in second costume waiting room. Don't pull on her for PvP. And the same thing with Sacred Justia. Sacred Justia is very expensive at 5 SP. You probably shouldn't be using her at all. Maybe you can use her a little bit on defense if you like to gamble and hope you can hit multiple units and nuke them. I've seen some people do that. I don't think it's very effective. I think there are better alternatives, but again, you do you. And then lastly, of course, we have PP Justia's rework. Now, brief history, PP Justia used to be arguably the worst costume in the game, next to maybe Anastasia's or Neon Angelica or maybe Nardus, right? That had almost no use in the game. Many people, myself included, +5'd her and were so excited to use her in PvP and found out she is absolute garbage. Like, that edgeguard is nothing compared to other edgeguards in the game like Sylvia has. She couldn't defend for, even against physical, when she had 90 defense, she couldn't survive most abilities. It was actually pathetic, and the opportunity cost of using 1 SP on turn 1 to do almost nothing was just not worth it. So she's very much waiting for a rework of some sort similar to her BGJ costume. And as a second note, Justia has generally been tied to fixed damage comps, usually relying on H-Lathel or sometimes at least Sammy as buffers to make sure she can cross certain damage thresholds, like hitting 30k, right? So that she can kill Licklesses and Voidgrands, who are built super tanky, right? There were some niche cases where people would run her as kind of a flex unit, trying to get like a random 2 SP stab on a low HP unit, but mostly she's used in fixed damage comps. This has all changed with PP Justia. She is a lot more flexible now. So here's her new stats, right? She gives herself evasion for 4 hits, right? And then she has a 300% attack steroid, and they also increased the attack cap so she can't overcap on her attack. So this girl is doing crazy damage now. She can now be a buffer for free with some risk, or you can continue to pair her with the Lathel and Sammy buffers for less risk. She now gives SP insurance. So since she gives herself 6 SP, even if you have SP stolen from Eclipse or Ulstein on turn 2, she is still very likely to have the full 12 SP on turn 3, which makes Eclipse and Ulstein a lot less useful against her. Not to mention that Ulstein and Eclipse aren't even going to hit her because she's going to dodge all of their attacks. And because of her 4x evasion, she now can fully tank oftentimes 2 full enemy abilities. Again, if we look here at the most commonly used abilities in the game, we see on defense on turn 2, we see Eclipse, we see Bloodglut and Justia, we see Root Kick, right? We see Vanaka. There's a lot of stuff here. There are multi-hits that I'll talk about that do counter her, but a lot of 1 and 3 times hits that she's just going to tank 1 or 2 of those completely and maybe die on the 3rd. So this girl is now a tank all by herself for a 1 SP investment. The weaknesses now for Justia is that obviously running her turn 1 means you have a weaker turn 1. The enemy is more likely to have all of their units survive, which means if PP Justia is popular, people should be a little more greedy on defense. You should maybe run 2 tanks instead of 3. Maybe run a buffer, right, to make sure that you can do a ton of damage, or put more multi-hits, right? So she does have some weaknesses. She is vulnerable to multi-hit costumes. Again, I'll talk about her bigger problems of costumes that she faces when she's attacking. And there's also a bug that's been in the game for quite a while. I can't imagine it's intentional, where costumes cannot be run if an effect from the previous time you use that costume still is active. And the most common examples I can think of are PP Justia, Maid Rubia, and Voidgran. So PP Justia and Maid Rubia both dodge for 3 and 4 attacks, not respected, I said those backwards. And then Voidgran can counter for 5. If those counters and dodges have not been used up by the time their costume is sequenced to run again, they won't run that costume, and that actually can cost you fights. It's not super common, but again, when we're talking about trying to get from like 85% to 90% or 90 to 95% win rates, every little bit matters, and this bug, being in the game for so long, continues to be a problem. I would be a little bit wary of it if you're running PP Justia, especially if you don't have all of her costumes that you're comfortable using in a full cycle, right? So just know that she may be delayed before she can use her PP Justia costume again, and it may cost you some fights. So for team ideas, There's a bunch here. I'll kind of go through these. There's the Giga Evade costume, where you run Helena, 80 Diana, Justia, and Rubia, and some kind of flex. Or alternatively, you can use Rue, so Helena, Rue, 80 Diana, Justia, and then you still have 1 SP left over. Usually your flex, in my opinion, should be Shara for that Dispel, and I would put her as high up in your costume list as you can, so that she has a costume queued but doesn't use a costume turn 1, just because Dispel is so strong in turn 3. You can run like maximum turtle if you really wanted, something like Helena, 80 Diana, the standard turtle with PP Shara, or you can use like Bonk Glacia for some extra magic tankiness. You can use Elenier for Dispel, and then Justia. You can use Gimped Fixed Damage, which is what I've been running. So instead of Lathel, we now only have room for Samei, and it's Samei, Zenith, Elenier. I've been running Alex and then Justia, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then there's like taunt comps that you can run, so you can do Helena, 80 Diana, Seer, and then put a Shahara costume that she doesn't use turn 1, and then a Justia, something like that. So those are some ideas. There might be more. I have some other ideas I'm going to try next week that I don't want to reveal just yet, but those are my thoughts for now. And then for defense, I don't think there's anything special about a comp that uses her. I think she's viable on defense, but it is very dependent on not getting hit by like a Zenith, right? Because if Zenith hits you, she's going to consume all your counters, and then the next costume is going to come out and wipe you out. So it's a little bit of a gamble. I do think BGJ, Bloodglut and Justia is probably a little better for now, but if you see a lot of PP Justias, I think it's totally fine to start going Kendo, start going whatever the swipe one is called, so that she hits multiple times after you use her PP Justia costume. Just because right now, with the influx of PP Justia users, there's a lot of there's more priority put on multi-hit costumes. So how to deal with her? There's a couple ways you can. The most straightforward is just having a huge multi-hit costume hit her. So the simplest example is going to be Pyrorubia, which I have put at S tier on defense for forever. I think this is another great example of when it still belongs on S tier. If she gets on top of Justia, like, she is going to absolutely demolish her. The first 4 hits, yes, are going to be blocked, but the 5th hit is going to reduce her armor, and then the 6th hit is going to wipe her off the face of the earth, assuming it's a crit. So Pyrorubia is great against her. Now, Pyrorubia is expensive, and I don't think a lot of people run it, but I think it's very strong. Then there's PP Shara, right? That has the 5 hit. If you crit on the 5th hit, you probably kill her. Again, it depends a little bit on the exact stats, but you should be fine. Yuri, I think, is really great, doing a 4 hit that gets rid of her whole stack. And then a lot of minimum 3 hit abilities. I would just say avoid single hit abilities if you're trying to counter PP Justia in particular. And if you can get rid of the stacks on her, then silences are really, really good, right? You may not have the resources to kill her, but there are some great AoE silences. There's Shara's Code S, of course there's Elenier, and then you have Olstein that can all silence and neutralize her. So you don't even need to kill her necessarily. Just throw a lot of silences, and you might happen to get her silenced so that she can't cast on turn 3 and turn 5. And then of course there's dodge evasion, so you can always counter with your own dodge and evasion. If you run a Rue or a Justia or an Mrubia, right, these are things that will make the Justia waste her ability on that unit while your other units can clean up. You can also use counters, so counters continue to be great against Justia. Your dodge and evasion doesn't do anything when you're being countered while attacking, so if you get the Void and Idle Grand combo off and you have that 90 something K HP, if the PP Justia uses something like a Kendo, she's going to kill herself on her turn. And so in general, I'd say using 3-hit costumes, and also for positioning, I would say using the box formation probably is the best way to defend against her for now, because a lot of people are running Bloodglut and Justia as their turn 3 follow-up costume, and this way she only kills 1 unit. And then lastly, the 1 unit I think should get a little bit of the limelight is Glacia. So Glacia can force Justia to attack her, and she won't kill her if it's if they run Bloodglut and Justia, which I've seen most commonly. So if you don't have a great Void Grant, but you have a decent Glacia, I would consider running her with her taunt on turn 2, knowing that she's probably going to die, but getting that Justia to waste an attack on her, give herself her heal, and let your team live another day while you can kind of whittle down the Justia. For positioning, there's not too much that's different from what I've already mentioned in my first attack guide for PvP, but I will mention one niche thing with PP Justia specifically. So it might be tempting to put her in the back of your team and be like, oh yeah, she's going to tank Eclipse and any of their skip abilities and stuff like that and get a lot of value. But one thing you need to be very scared of is Rue kick, right? Because if Rue is on the defense and is in the middle or right columns and she kicks this unit, whatever they are, it's almost certainly going to kill your Justia, even if she has 90 defense, because Rue kick just does crazy damage. and your Justia is going to get no value from her evasion. She's going to die. That's just the reality of kicks, and that's one thing that characters that rely on evasion, or dodge, which is now what Justia does, have to make sure they're taken into consideration. So I wouldn't put Justia in her own, I wouldn't put Justia behind another unit. I would put her either in her own column, something like this, or I'd put her in front, right? And again, just remember, she's basically a pseudo tank. She's, aside from a few specific costumes that do counter her, she's going to fully tank one ability, maybe fully tank two, and then die on the third or the second, depending on what the abilities are, right? She's almost always going to be able to fully tank one ability unless the opponent specifically is planning to counter her. So I'm fine putting her in the front, and I'm fine putting her solo, depending again on how you want to position. But that's just the main thing I would consider when talking about her on offense. As far as tier list updates go, I'm going to start PP Justia in S tier. I think she belongs there, but I did put this little diamond note in the bottom right corner because she requires a lot of investment and she requires multiple other usable costumes. So you can't just get PP Justia if you haven't pulled already on her BGJ, her Blood Glutton, or on her Kendo costume from when the game started, or if you haven't gotten copies of the others from somewhere. Like, this girl needs to hit hard, turns 3, 5, 7, 9, and she does sometimes find weakness with her single hits because they can be dodged, they can be, Glacia can resurrect through them. So you definitely need multiple costumes on her already invested in to get really good mileage out of PP Justia. But I do think she belongs in here once you've gotten there. I will also note that I did a lot of testing this week, and I specifically did testing at right before the end of season, because you don't know what kinds of defenses you're running into in the middle of the week. There's a lot of people in GM and in High Masters who are not going to end there at the end of the season because their defenses suck, or they're going to they haven't put together a strong defense. And so getting a really good climb with PP Justia doesn't necessarily mean your team is strong. And so I think it's most important to try to push at the end of season and see where you end up ranking. So I was able to hold GM2 with her here, but when I did it, I didn't have the best of offense. I actually had a better time in defense than I normally do, but on offense I only went 40-6. You can see here I lost a couple times due to multi-hits. So here's one where PP Justia had to tank both Justia and Shara, and she died, and then another one where she had to tank Pirate Rubia and she died, and another one where she had to tank just a PP Shara and she died. And so these are all ways that Justia, as I mentioned, multi-hits are how you deal with her, as probably her biggest counter right now. And also I would point out that a lot of defenses have 100% gone full multi-hits. Like, you've seen Zenith, or I've seen Zeniths now, I've seen Manager Greys, I've seen a lot of units that are just trying to get those hits on Justia and get her counter down. Aside from that, I don't have any other changes for offense on turn 1. And then for defense turn 2 costumes, I have made quite a few changes. I've moved PP Shara to the top simply because of her 5 hit. Like I said, you can kill Justia on that 5th hit if it crits, because Justias generally don't run any Emras, and so I would put her up here. I've also moved her other 2 costumes down a peg, specifically for that reason, because they can't deal with PP Justia nearly as well as PP Shara can all by herself. I've also moved both Zenith and Rubia up to the A tier, because they can both deal well with PP Justia. One gets rid of her counter and one gets counters of her own. Rubia does really nicely with her own evasions, and it's on a lower turn cooldown than PP Justia, so she'll get it multiple times. And as always, probably her best counter, Pirate Rubia, I have left up there at the S tier. I've said it's S tier for a while. You don't see it very often, but when you do see it, she's absolutely going to clean house with it, and she will one-shot PP Justia all by herself, although she's a bit expensive. I'm starting out PP Justia herself in the A tier. I don't know for sure if that's where she's going to belong long term. She's going to be just like most other carries. You kind of have to protect them turn 1, and if they can survive turn 1, then turn 3, she's going to be a little more independent because she's going to have that counter, and so she can start to tank things, and she'll really start to deal damage in turn 4. I moved Manager Grey down a little bit. I moved Olstein down a little bit as well, because I used to be a huge fan of Olstein, even though I don't have his X gear, so I can't really run him. But he was like the wind tank that could solo, he could hold back Shara all by himself by tanking the heck out of her and silencing her and neutering her, etc. He can't do that nearly as well against PP Justia, and now with more people running Rubia, Justia, and Ru than ever on offense, he's very likely to use his SP and hit like 1, maybe 2 units and silence them, and the other units he won't. And so if he can't silence multiple units, he's not nearly as useful, and so for that reason I'm putting him here. back down in B tier. I also moved Professor Shara up into B tier because technically Professor Shara I think can one-shot Justia as well if you get a crit, and of course if you have Behel and a buff. So there's potential for Professor Shara. I have died a couple times to it. I think the nice thing about it over PP Shara is it has a better AoE, maybe more likely to hit her. So if you're really frustrated against PP Justia and you have a really well-built Magic Professor Shara, maybe consider that. And then lastly, I put Sacred Justia down here. I have seen her a little bit in High Masters. I don't know if I saw her in GM, but again, this is a costume that isn't a PvP costume, but if you have no alternative, you're a super new player and you just +5 to this for whatever reason, go ahead and throw her in your defense. She might happen to nuke multiple units, and again, the more units she hits, the more damage she does. So not a great PvP costume, but better than no alternative. So those are my thoughts on tier list updates. Overall, I think PP Justia was a successful rework. I think it's currently very strong, but requires high investment. Does have counters, and currently has the same bug issue that Ruby and Void Grain do, so I really hope the devs get that fixed. But I'm excited to try different strats with her next week, and also see how other players develop with her and her counters in the coming weeks, because I definitely think she's changed how people approach defense, which is a meta definer in my opinion, when players change their defense specifically to counter her. So as always, let me know in the comments if you pulled for her, how she's doing for you in PvP, and as always, I will see you in Mirror Wars.